Thank you so much for coming today to this Alcorn Immigration Law Fiscal Year 2021 Changes to the H-1B Lottery webinar. So excited to have you here. My name is Sophie Alcorn, and I am the founding partner here at Alcorn. And we have an hour set aside. I want to make this super valuable for you, so we have a very information-packed webinar. That being said, you are always welcome to ask questions. I'm more than happy to answer them. This is live, this is real, this is not like a pre-recorded live webinar. So feel free to add a question in the Zoom question and answer panel, or also you can always send a direct chat to me through the interface. So wonderful. With that, let's dive in. All right, so just a little bit about ourselves to introduce us to you. So the mission of my firm, Alcorn Immigration Law, which I started from my kitchen a few years ago while I was taking care of my two kids who were 1 and 4 at the time. Our mission is to overcome borders, expand opportunity, and connect the world by practicing compassionate, cutting-edge, and rigorous immigration law in service of the betterment of humanity. And I'm so proud of our core values because we leverage them in all aspects of the firm, and by being thoughtful and considerate and strategic at the beginning of every case, I'm really proud of the success rates that we've had. So to introduce you a little bit more, this is me. I'm a certified specialist in immigration and nationality law, certified by the State Bar of California Board of Specialization. I'm a second-generation immigration lawyer. My dad was also a certified specialist, and my mom is an immigrant from Germany. And I'm super passionate about immigration. I love helping people overcome borders and achieve their dreams. And on that note, I've been a TechCrunch author and speaker. I have a Dear Sophie column in TechCrunch, so if you ever have friends or something who just want an answer to a question, you're always welcome to submit questions to me there. And I'm excited that soon we'll be announcing our new immigration law podcast, Immigration Law for Tech Startups. A wonderful team who I work with, my partner, Anita Kumrikian, our H-1B team, which includes Gilbert Orozco and Amina Kashari. And I'm so excited because everybody on our team is really passionate. We get this, it's for us, it's personal. We're all either children of immigrants or immigrants ourselves or married to immigrants. And so we really care a lot about helping our clients. And the way I got started the way my family's immigration journey to the United States initially began was, this is my great-grandfather and his certificate of citizenship. His name is John Grana, and he came with his family to Ellis Island on a ship and crossing the Atlantic Ocean from Sicily over 100 years ago. And he settled in Chicago during the time of Prohibition, when there was no alcohol that was legal in the United States. So, I have a passion for helping entrepreneurs and people at startups. And I think my connection to entrepreneurialism may have begun with him. Apparently the way he made money during that time was by doing liquor runs into Canada to bring back barrels of whiskey for all of the judges, lawyers, doctors, and policemen in the town. So if you can see on his certificate of citizenship, his distinctive marks were that his right arm was permanently bent and his thumb was broken. So, for all of us, the immigration story is important to our identity and our heritage. And we have an amazing team here in Mountain View. We're really supportive and passionate about helping our clients. Over the years, as we've grown the firm and scaled it, we're pleased to work with really inspiring, brilliant people from all over the world who are bringing their dreams into reality here, primarily in Silicon Valley, but really hailing from all over the world. We help a lot of quickly growing startups, whether, we're happy to support somebody at the pre-seed level, and our clients are, Series A, Series D, IPO, and beyond. So we're familiar with all of the stages of the startup life cycle. And, the people who we work with who inspire me are often coming from other companies in the Valley and trying to figure out how they can move away and start their own companies. And so it's been really exciting to watch the growth of their companies. And I'm just honored that we've been able to bring more attention to Silicon Valley immigration in the news as well. And then finally, we have won several awards, and then one of them that I'm quite proud of that's recent is that we were officially certified as a woman-owned business by the National Women's Business Enterprise Council. And this is really important for those of you whose companies have a focus on supplier diversity, because having a woman-owned law firm can increase your it can be a way for your company to show its commitment to diversity and inclusion. Okay, so let's dive in with what do you need to know about immigration. And I do have so much about H-1Bs to share with you, but I always really like to set the stage by just taking a bird's eye view and putting it in context, because I think it makes a lot more sense that way. So obviously you're here because you know that immigration law is complex. It actually is really complex. A lot of federal judges have written opinions saying that it's more complicated than tax law. And then you pair that with the fact that a lot of the people who have to navigate through the system were born in other countries. So that's why we try to build a lot of compassion into what we do, because communication is so critical so that everybody, whether it's the CEO or HR or the general counsel or the beneficiaries, employees themselves, know that they're being supported through this process. So the typical path is that people often will get non-immigrant visas to come to the United States. Then they will try to get a green card somehow, either through employment sponsorship or perhaps family sponsorship. And then once they have a green card, they're able to apply for citizenship. So one thing that I will just throw out there for those of you with multinational companies, if you have a long-term strategic plan to bring a key executive to the United States, you don't actually have to get them a visa first. You could potentially just sponsor that person for a green card. So the critical thing there is that it's not mandatory to have a visa before you can get a green card. Sometimes in some circumstances that makes sense for people. And then if you're in HR and you're looking at the H-1B lottery ahead and trying to figure out which of your employees or potential hires you want to include in the lottery, it's also helpful to have this overview of the standard path of a lot of international professionals who were educated in the United States. So many people come to the US to enroll in our universities as students on F1 visas. And this could be for a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or a PhD. Now, some of those programs do allow people to have a paid internship during their course of study. And the one that people often choose for that is called F1 CPT, Curricular Practical Training. And that's before they graduate. And then after people graduate, with any 3 of those degrees, they automatically get a 1-year work permit called OPT, which stands for Optional Practical Training. And in that period, they're eligible to work for any company, part-time or full-time, as a W-2 employee or a 1099 contractor. They could be self-employed, they could volunteer. But this is typically where students apply for jobs at companies for full-time employment. And so at the end of that year, unless they get another type of visa or a green card, they would have to leave, except there's a special rule called STEM OPT which is to help people who have graduated with degrees in science, technology, engineering, or math to get an additional 2-year work permit after their OPT. And this has a little bit different of a requirement. A training plan is required. The company has to be participating in the E-Verify system. And in that training program, we have to write a detailed plan about how their employment will allow them to further the objectives of their education. So that's something we often help companies with, as well as writing those training plans and making sure that their OPT employees successfully bridge that process over to STEM OPT. And so if an individual has paid perhaps tens or maybe $100,000 or more of US tuition to be able to study here, they might want to be able to stay here longer than 3 years, especially if they're working for you and you have a position open for them. And so that is where non-immigrant visas come into play. And there's actually a lot of flavors. I'll just touch on that briefly in a minute. But the most common one, and the reason you're all here today, is to learn more about the H-1B and this lottery. So the lottery happens once a year. And I'm going to go through this a lot in detail. It used to be on April 1st, but now it's critical that you take action during the month of March. So I'll have some slides with timelines for you to take a look at. But basically, that means that if you know that you've extended a job to somebody who will graduate and get their OPT in May or June, you could actually put them in the lottery this March. There's really no reason that you shouldn't. So that's your very first opportunity to sponsor them for an H-1B in the lottery. And then obviously you can apply for them for each year of their OPT and STEM OPT. So people will often have 3 chances, perhaps even 4 chances at the lottery. And then, once somebody has a non-immigrant visa or petition that's allowing them to work for your company, then they're really hoping that the company will come in and sponsor them for a green card. If they're Indian or Chinese, at least to get their turn in line started with a priority date. And if they're from other countries, perhaps to do the whole green card process for them. And then often people want to become citizens at the end of 5 years of having a green card. And that's typically something that people have done individually. But we do see some companies offering immigration as a benefit. So, even if like they're getting married and they could get a green card through their spouse, sometimes the companies want to pay for that process as a perk to show goodwill and increase employee retention. So that's a possibility as well. Okay, so lots of options for immigration. We have this chart that you will be receiving for registering in this webinar at the end via email, so you can look for this. This is actually just the first part of it. I have a paper copy somewhere. I was just looking to see if I had it here. But the chart is longer than this screen, and this is something that I brainstormed in my kitchen one night at the very beginning of the law firm, and founders and executives from all over the world have told us that it's very helpful because it's just this handy infographic that breaks down the main categories for visas and green cards, and breaks it down into who's eligible, what are the steps, and what are the benefits of having this non-immigrant status or type of green card. So as you can see here, there's options for investors, for multinational managers, for extraordinary ability, and then also other visa types such as the H-1B, the TN, the J1, E3 for Australians, H-1B1 for Singaporeans and Chileans. So lots of options, and I've been writing extensively about the other ones online and with dear Sophie, and we'll be covering them in detail in the podcast. So if you ever need any more information about them, you're always welcome to reach out. But let's focus on H-1Bs now. So, okay, just high-level overview. What is an H-1B? So an H-1B is a non-immigrant visa or status that allows one person to work inside the United States as an employee for the company that has sponsored them. The person's job has to be what is called a specialty occupation, which is legal jargon, or as a lawyer would prefer to say, a term of art that is defined in the law and in the regulations and with case law. But essentially, it has to be a professional position. And the job offer has to require a level of expertise commensurate with at least a bachelor's degree in a related field. And then the company has to commit to paying the person the prevailing wage, which is determined based on that person's place of work, their particular job classification, and also their level of expertise. So that's kind of like the building blocks. You need a company, you need a candidate, and you need a job offer, and all three of those need to qualify. Okay, and I see the questions starting to come in, and so I will be happy to answer those. And for questions not directly on the slides, I'm going to save them to the end, but please keep them coming and I'll have time to answer them. So thank you. Cool. So next, H-1B basics. Like, why do we have this lottery to begin with? Because it's really annoying. So why? So the reason we have this lottery is because the laws passed by Congress and signed by the president limit the number of H-1Bs that the government is able to hand out every government fiscal year. So there are 65,000 a year for people from any country with any level of expertise. And then there's an additional 20,000 set aside for people who have advanced degrees from United States universities, so master's degrees and PhDs. And then, you know, when I started my law career as an attorney, going on 12 years ago, that was during the recession. So demand for H-1Bs really tanked. And I remember one of the first H-1Bs I started working on back then, we were able to get for somebody like in November or maybe in October. Anyway, it was the very end of the fiscal year. The lottery wasn't going on and they were immediately available. But ever since the economy has started picking up, there is more demand than there is supply in the world of H-1Bs. I don't know how many people will be petitioning this year, but over the last several years, there have been over 200,000 petitions for about 85,000 spots. So, you know, just rough ballpark rule of thumb, if somebody has a bachelor's degree, they're probably going to have about a 1 in 3 or maybe 1 in 4 chance of getting selected. So the next slide is obviously very rounded up because you could have an H-1B from any country in the world. But in general, roughly 55% of H-1B holders in the US are from India, about a third are from China, and the rest are from countries all over the world, but predominantly European nations. Okay, so now another really important thing to understand about the H-1Bs is how long do they last and how do you use them? Because it's one thing to have it, but you also need to know like what you can do with it and when it's going to end. So the earliest start date for a brand new H-1B for a person who's been selected in the lottery is always October 1st. And that's because that's the start of the new government fiscal year. So right now we're talking about the lottery for candidates who will be allowed to have H-1Bs in government fiscal year 2021, which starts on October 1st, 2020. So it's kind of screwy. That's the way it is. And that's why the numbers are always weird for the years. Now, in H-1B, the typical maximum period is 6 years, but usually one H-1B can be issued for up to 3 years at a time. And because with the first H-1B, your legal team has to go through a process with the LCA, the labor condition application, which the Department of Labor requires, and that has its own date fields on it with certain time ranges that we can request. Usually the first H-1B ends up being valid for like 2.5 years or 2 3/4 years, but don't worry, the person can always recapture time and get additional extensions up to 6 years total. Now, another question that arises is, okay, I have somebody, we've tried this 2 years before, they didn't get selected, they're on their final year of STEM OPT, it is going to end on July 15th. What happens if they get selected in the lottery this year because they can't start working on the H-1B until October 1st? So there's something special to protect those individuals. It's called CAP-GAP. And basically, as long as their H-1B petition has been received by USCIS and it's either still pending or it's been approved, they have permission to continue living and working in the United States for your company up through September 30th when their status changes on October 1st and they kick into H-1B. So ideally, it's supposed to be continuous and streamlined. There were some years where the government turned off premium processing, and that really delayed some people's petitions. And so if the government is still making a decision for the person on, let's say, October 15th, basically we had to advise those candidates that on September 30th would be their last day of work. And if they were seeking a change of this is only for people who are seeking a change of status, so then they needed to stay in the country but go on an unpaid leave of absence until their H-1B got approved and they were able to start working in H-1B. And then the other question is, well, okay, I have an employee who's from India or China, and the green card wait times for them are ridiculous, like on the order of 150 years for somebody from India who has a PhD. So what happens after their 6 years of H-1B run out? And that is where the green card extensions come into play. If they ideally have an approved I-140 petition before their final year of H-1B status, they are eligible for 3-year renewals of H-1B until they end up getting a green card. Great, and I see more questions, and that's fantastic, and I will be answering them throughout my presentation, so keep them coming. I love your questions. Okay, so I'm actually super thrilled for companies in Silicon Valley about some of the changes that have happened to the H-1B system over the last year or two. I think it's great for early stage and scaling startups here in the Valley who need a high level of talent and expertise. So the last time we had this lottery, the government actually made a change that really helped a lot of the beneficiaries who our client companies were hiring. And this is that they changed the order of the H-1B lottery so that people who are in that master's cap with either master's or PhDs essentially get 2 bites at the apple for being selected. So we saw the national acceptance rate for people with advanced degrees in the US increase to about 55%. So all things being equal, if you're deciding between a candidate with a US master's degree or an international master's degree, the one with the US master's degree will have higher odds of being selected for an H-1B. Okay, so now I'm going to dive into the changes ahead, and that's going to start touching on the questions that you've been asking me in the Q&A panel. So, okay, so then and now, let's compare last year to this year and talk about how the process is different at a very high level. So last year, there was nothing electronic about this process. If you wanted to have H-1Bs prepared for everybody, kind of like now, mid-February was the very latest that you could wait to have a chance at doing this. Because the lawyers had to go through multi-step, multi-week process of gathering the documents together, preparing the LCA, and getting the whole petition together and ready to file. And that was mandatory. And we had to send in all of these petitions on, to reams and reams of paper to prepare them. And they all had to arrive at USCIS within the first 5 business days of April to have a chance at being selected in the lottery. And it was like a race, and what if a courier, lost tracking on a box of petitions? So it created a lot of headaches for legal practitioners. So the new process that they're rolling out is this electronic registration system. And essentially, you will be able to log on in the month of March, pay $10 per beneficiary who you want to sponsor. And then we're going to find out at the end of March who was selected. And then for whomever was selected, we then have 90 days to mail in the completed paper petitions. So it's very exciting. But we have some questions because it's the first year that this system exists. So it's starting soon. There is a special portal for employers who are called registrants. There's also a portal that we, the legal team, would have to support you. And then we're able to go in and ensure that everything's set up and you okay it, and then everything is submitted to the government. So here are the critical dates, and don't worry, this is going to be in the email that you're getting after the webinar, so you can put this into your calendars, but I will go through them and tell you what they are. So, okay, February 24th at noon, I think that's a Monday. If you are HR or people ops at a company or general counsel, that is your first opportunity to create your brand new account at my.uscis.gov. So you're going to need the account, but you're not allowed to submit any registrations in February. So on March 1st at noon, which Eastern time, which is a Sunday, and I don't think you're going to need to do this on a Sunday because you're still going to have 19 days to get your people in. So I don't think you necessarily have to do this from your couch in your pajamas on a Sunday. I think it can probably wait until Monday. But that is when the initial registration period for you guys to submit all of the names of your beneficiaries will begin. And that period goes through March 20th, 2020 at noon. So this is super critical because last year, April was the deadline, but this year, if you snooze in March, you lose. So you have to make sure that everybody you want to have a chance at getting an H-1B, that you're putting their name in the electronic system between March 1st and March 20th, okay? Cool. So after that, sometime between March 20th to March 31st, that's when the government is going to start notifying you through the portal about who got accepted. And then March 1st is the earliest date that we can possibly send in somebody's paper-based physical H-1B petition if they got selected in the lottery. And then there's going to be a 90-day deadline. So for anybody who was selected, we have to make sure that their petition arrives at USCIS within 90 days of the date of selection. Okay. So, next. Great. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a glimpse of this portal. So it's $10. We're going to help you take care of that if you are one of our clients. And then here's a little preview of what USCIS has released that this system is actually going to look like. So you're on their official website, you click on tools, and then under self-service tools, that's my USCIS, and that is where you click to sign up and make your profile essentially for your company. And so this will be based on your email account. So, if you're HR, you're probably going to use a corporate email address. If multiple people are sharing this, you might want to consider a special email address for it at your company. or the first year you could test it out with just your email address. You will be creating a password, and then they use two-step verification. So you can either use it via an app or a text message or an email. And so I'm glad that they're including all of these information security measures into the system. And then, password reset. So like, what's the name of your first dog, or what car did you drive? Just the standard thing to reset your password. And then this is something that's really important because it is not self-evident. So if you want to put somebody into the electronic lottery, you are not supposed to check the first box for petitioner or requester, but you are actually supposed to check the third box saying, I am an H-1B registrant, okay? And so that will allow your legal team to enter representation and support you throughout the process. Okay, so then when the period actually opens on March 1st, that is when you're going to be able to put in the names of your candidates. And so we're going to be working with our clients, and we will have our own passcode that we generate that we'll provide to you, and that's like the key that unlocks the Form G28, which allows you to agree that such and such is your law firm. So this is basically super straightforward. You would do this anyway in a paper form on any H-1B that you would be normally filing. And it just says like, this is my name, this is our company, here's our contact information, and we agree that XYZ law firm or Alcorn is our attorney for this particular case. And then there's various information release consents that you have the option to check, but essentially we want to make sure that as your attorneys we're receiving all of the documents and that you authorize that. And then you just click submit. So then we actually get to the H-1B electronic registration. And so something really critical here is that and I think this is related to one of the questions that I just received, which was, how many registrations can there be for a specific candidate? So the government will do this based on the employer identification number. So one company can only submit one H-1B for each beneficiary, but it is possible for beneficiaries to go out and have multiple companies offer them a job and put them into this lottery. So there you go. Basically, if you're HR, don't put in somebody twice, or else they're going to be, their ability to participate in the lottery selection process will be canceled. Okay, so now, when we're actually putting in people's information about each beneficiary, it's not that much information that's needed. We don't need to go into like their address history or their marriage history or even their university. It just requires some very basic information about their name, their date of birth, country of citizenship, and also, this is where you're going to be making the determination about whether they get to go into the master's cap. And I'm so excited about this, but if you're sponsoring anybody who, like, let's say, Stanford is on the quarter system and people there don't graduate until the first or second week of June. But let's say you have a candidate who's at Stanford finishing their master's degree and they'll graduate June 12th. I don't know what the actual day is. As long as they have the degree by the time we submit the paper-based petition, they qualify for the master's cap. So you would be able to check yes for that person here. Even if they don't graduate, as long as they're going to get their degree within the 90-day window after being selected, so that we have a chance to document it on paper before the deadline to submit the petitions. Okay, so next, there's just a verification process. So you have to be able to actually, click yes, you're actually submitting this. And you have to attest that you understand what's going on, that you speak English, and that you know what you're agreeing to. And then there's a chance you have to acknowledge the statement and have the signature of the authorized representative of the company. And then you click finish and you send it over to us, your law firm, where we can finalize everything for you. So that's what it's going to look like for you. And then once you have everybody located, everybody uploaded into this system, and you can actually do 250 people at a time, and it's supposed to autosave, so that's really cool. But you will be able to download a CSV file of all of your beneficiaries with their status. So, that can be handy, and then you could potentially feed that into, however you want to notify your employees. Seems like there's an opportunity there for technology to have auto notification per company, based on how you want to release that information to your beneficiaries. Okay, so there's two ways that we are helping our clients with this process. A lot of early stage startups who are still either bootstrapping or have raised a pre-seed round are choosing to do the electronic filing only for now. So we're just supporting them to register the candidates in the lottery in March and take care of the payment and make sure that goes smoothly. And then, and so they're taking a chance that this is all going to go off smoothly and without a hitch. But then for whoever's selected, then they're choosing to make the commitment of preparing the full petitions later at that time. So it's less work now, it's less money now, and resources are only being focused on the candidates that get accepted. The risk is, this is a brand new system. I hope it's going to work and they're not going to pull the plug on it. They said that if they do, they would give us plenty of notice. I think we're committed at this point to it happening, but there's always a risk of the system crashing or something. But hopefully with the 20-day window, there's going to be more than enough time to get through any glitches like that. Now, other companies who don't want to take any chances just because they already have the budget for the full H-1B petitions from the prior year, or because there are key employees who they would want to get a decision as soon as possible on their H-1B petitions. They're choosing to do the full petition now, like we were doing last year for people. So that's an option as well, and that's probably the safest option. So here are some tips for how you can start preparing. In general, here are documents that you probably need to gather for an H-1B. You could have all of your candidates start creating Google Drive or Box folders with scans of all of their transcripts and diplomas, their CV or resume, their past immigration documents, such as their I-20s for their F1 enrollment, or their DS-2919s if they happen to have had J-1 visas. And then for individuals who got whose degrees are from other countries, it's important that they get their degrees verified by credential evaluators to prove that their foreign degree is equivalent to a US bachelor's degree. And also, if you want to hire anybody who didn't complete college, it's possible to do a 3-for-1 transfer to get a degree equivalent. So let's say somebody did 3 years of college but then dropped out, but then had 3 years of working as a software engineer. You can use their 3 years of work as a software engineer to be equivalent to 1 year of studies in a computer science or electrical engineering degree. And then for the company, so if this is your first time doing an H-1B, it's really important that we get your company's federal employer identification number verified so that we can start the Department of Labor process. So you would find that on your SS4 letter, which you get at the very beginning during the incorporation process. It's your tax ID number. Also, just marketing materials, potentially taxes or bank statements showing your ability to pay could be valuable. If you're very early stage, pitch deck or marketing materials can help prove that you're a real company. And then, and I'll touch on this a little bit more, we could also start brainstorming what is the proper job title for this person, and you'll need to be very clear with us what their job duties are, and then we have to make sure that the job you're offering them qualifies as a specialty occupation because it's professional and not administrative. So another thing that's been happening, which if you've done this before, you're familiar with, is that across the country, the number of requests for evidence has risen, and that can be related to some specific job codes for people's jobs on the H-1Bs. So some that I want to highlight here are computer systems analysts, data analysts, and network and computer systems administrators, and software developers. There's been pushback from the government about whether these jobs should qualify for the H-1B. So we just want to be really strategic and rigorous at the beginning to help make sure you can put your best foot forward for people in these categories. So another question that I got in the chat window and that I have the answer to here is, do my employees have to leave the country? And what's the difference between a change of status and consular processing? So in general, most of the people who are seeking H-1B are probably on OPT right now, and most employers usually pick a change of status for them in the United States, which means they don't have to leave and go get a new visa. They just stay here, and assuming the thing is approved on October 1st, then they start working in H-1B status on October 1st. That does mean that their travel is restricted. So if anybody has a job role that's related to something international and they need to travel to different client sites, or it's critical that they attend certain conferences, or perhaps they have a relative whose health requires them to visit another country. For people in those situations, it's safer to choose consular processing, which means their H-1B doesn't kick in until they go to a visa appointment in another country, apply for a visa, and then they come back in and they start working. So that's an option, and that's something that we normally figure out with our clients on a case-by-case basis. So here's my timeline of what this whole process is going to look like. So now is the time, if you haven't done so already, that it's really important that you find your legal team and get everything set up so that you can be represented in this process. You need to decide who you're going to sponsor. You need to decide if you're retaining your attorneys to just do the electronic registration or the whole petition for now, and also to start preparing and gathering documents. So February 24th is when you can create that account on my.uscis.gov. March 1st is when you can start putting your candidates into the electronic registration system. And then March 20th is when it's the earliest date that we could start being notified by USCIS about who has been selected. But they could take until March 31st potentially to make those choices. And then there's a 90-day window for each candidate in which they can submit their H-1B petition after they are selected. So that's roughly going to be about from April to June. But basically the government has created a huge wait list of people who are not being selected. So if there is a high number of employers who don't actually follow through with filing the documents, then you know, after those people's 90 days, their spot would be released and somebody new could have a chance. So we're probably going to see some H-1Bs trickling in throughout the year with our ability to do the paperwork for them. And this is related to another question that I got, which is, will there be a penalty for employers who participate in the electronic lottery but don't follow through and submit a petition for the selected candidate? And the answer to that, we asked USCIS specifically, and the answer to that is no, there is no penalty this year. I could see that if there's a lot of abuse of this system, then perhaps USCIS might consider doing that in the future. But this year, there's no penalty if you don't follow through. So then I really don't know when requests for evidence will start to come in or when the government will start making these decisions about who gets approved. We'll have to see. I imagine probably by July we'll start seeing that, if not sooner. Also, currently premium processing is available for H-1Bs. The government has the discretion to flip the switch on that and turn it off without a lot of notice. So I'm hopeful that because there's so much less work for them to do this year, that will remain available, but we'll see. And then October 1st is the first possible start date. So my open questions list was a lot longer for just a few months ago before USCIS released updated information. So I'm happy that this is a short list of open questions now. But the two biggies that I have, you know, are hard to say. Probably we won't know unless and until it happens, but will it crash? I think the likelihood is low, but we just want to be prepared for that possibility. And then will premium processing continue to be available? I'm hopeful that it's yes, because of the advantages of the new system, but we'll see. So when you're diving into this process, here are things that you need to consider as a part of your investment. You know, it's not just your money, but it's also your time. And there's several steps that you do need to be involved in. So, you know, the prevailing wage, you have to commit to paying this person the minimum required by law. There could be a request for evidence, which will require you to gather more documentation. You may need the education evaluations or translations of different documents. And then of course there's legal fees and whether or not premium processing will be available or not. So this is our contact information. I'll leave it up here. You guys are always welcome to reach out. We have some articles that we'll be sending, including this one, which is behind the Extra Crunch paywall right now, but it's about immigration specifically for startups. And there's another one that I wrote a few weeks ago with this overview of the H-1B system. So you'll be receiving that as well. So now I'll dive into your questions, and you're welcome to continue sending them to me if you think of them as we're going. So the first question is on a related topic, which is the H-4 visa. And that's the visa for dependent spouses and children of H-1B beneficiaries. And so the issue with that is that a few years ago, under the prior administration, a special work permit was created for H-4 spouses who met certain conditions. And now it's under litigation, and there's been a lot of talk of that program ending. So the question is whether this visa is still valid as a working visa, and have we seen an increase of H-4 visa holders applying for their H-1B? So, okay, today these work permits are still valid. The administration's regulatory agenda for 2020 does set out that they're planning to sunset this program, but there's a lot of legal steps that they have to go through first in order to do that. So if somebody has a valid H-4 work permit, they're still allowed to be your employee. It's just, it's not a safe long-term option. So the best practice is anybody who's working for you on H4, if they qualify as a specialty occupation, you should definitely sponsor them in the H-1B lottery, and a lot of our clients do that. So thank you for that question. Okay, so then another question, if a candidate is planning to travel during any step in the process, will there be a problem? So yes, that ties back to that prior slide. If you can anticipate that anybody may need to travel at any point throughout between now and October 1st, it's really important that you share that with your legal team so that we can advise, you know, based on the specific travel dates, how long they're going to be gone, when they're leaving, when they're coming back. We'll advise you on your options and if you can choose a change of status or if it's safer to go with consular processing. So thank you for that question. Now, another one is there any part of the fees that a beneficiary can pay for, or should it only be the company paying all fees? So because this is a process that is tied to the Department of Labor, there are regulations that prohibit employees from paying for this process. So it's critical that the companies pay all of the legal fees and all of the electronic, you know, $10 registration fee, and then if you're selected, the filing fees. The one exception is that if the company doesn't provide premium processing, but that's something that the candidate really wants, it is possible for them to pay for premium processing, but please don't have them pay for anything else. Okay, and then another question is there's two more questions related to how the electronic system works. So one of it is, you know, who is doing what. So when you're working with an attorney, how this electronic registration system works. So you guys are going to be putting in the beneficiary information. We are going to be reviewing it and paying the fees on your behalf and submitting the information to the government. So it's a two-step process. And then another question is, does the electronic registration system show real-time or quicker updates to the status of the application in comparison to paper mail? Yes, that is one of the reasons I'm so excited that this process is being rolled out. So between March 20th and March 31st, you'll be able to log on and see that the person's status has changed. We don't know yet how we will be notified, so I don't know if you'll get like a generic email saying there has been a change to your account, log on to see what happened, or if you'll just have to log on every day and see if it changed. They haven't told us that part yet, but essentially you will see on your dashboard for each candidate if they were selected or if they're being placed on the wait list. And USCIS is going to fill up all 85,000 H-1Bs with approvals before they actually say that anybody is denied. But if they do find 2 registrations for the same individual from a single company, they will actually just mark that person as immediately being denied because you're not allowed to sponsor one person twice. And there's no appeal from that part of the denial. Another question is, what if you like make a mistake or change your mind after you put the person into the electronic system? And you can always remove somebody from consideration, but you will not be able to edit the entries or add new ones after the registration period ends. So it's important to be organized and systematic and get this information in properly at the beginning. So with that, I will just say that thank you so much for your attention and your attendance here and all of the fantastic questions. You can email us at any time, hello@alcorn.law. We'd be happy to schedule, if you're a company, a complimentary call to discuss your H-1B needs. You can also call us 855-546-0015. As a thank you for attending the webinar, you'll be receiving goodies via email that have a lot of the details about this process, so please look for that. And we're also doing stuff like this webinar all the time, so if you found it interesting and you would like to get further updates, you're welcome to follow us on social media as well. So with that, I will end early and give you 4 minutes to take a deep breath, meditate, and take a break before your next commitment. So thank you so much for attending, and we look forward to supporting you. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.